Hello and a warm welcome to Federal's special program, Capital Beat. India was present at the Board of Peace in Washington as an observer along with other countries. At its first official meeting, Donald Trump reiterated that he had imposed 200% tariffs on India and Pakistan, and it's then that both countries agreed for a ceasefire during Operation Sindoor. Trump also increased the number of jets down during Operation Sindoor and said that 11 jets were downed. And of course, this has been a number which has consistently been rising as far as Trump's statement on this is concerned. But the very next day, what we have seen today is that India has joined pact Silica. So, what we are asking today is Donald Trump trying to pressurize India in some way or the other to join the Board of Peace as a member? Joining me this evening is former Ambassador Meera Shankar. Thank you so much, ma'am, for joining. And India was present as an observer at the Board of Peace. Now, is it something which India shouldn't have done, should have refrained? What would you say?
I think India has tried to find some kind of middle ground. Many European countries did not attend, and the concern has been that ideally a board of peace, something like this, should have been, constituted by the UN and should have got international approval. In this case, the Board of Peace has been nominated, by President Trump, and then there are contributions also financially. Who is going to handle that? Nobody knows because, there's President Trump, there's his son-in-law, there's his aide, Steve Witkoff, and so on. So there were concerns whether this forum or its constitution had the kind of international imprimatur that would give it, good legitimacy. On the other hand, the peace plan, which this Board of Peace is going to, take forward and monitor, is something which has been approved by the majority of countries. And what is important is that it has been signed off on by both parties to the conflict, Israel as well as the Palestinians and most of the Arab countries. So if you look at the Board of Peace, most Arab countries, have agreed to attend, and it is something which, is the only game in town as far as bringing about peace in the region is concerned. Whether it may be, not exactly what the international community was looking for earlier with a two-state solution, it doesn't really fulfill most of the norms which people were looking for in a long-term political solution. But given the savagery of the kind of conflict which took place and the kind of battering that people in Gaza were subjected to, that this is something which is seen at least as bringing about some kind of halt, or not full, not a full cessation, but at least a winding down of the conflict. And secondly, I think India has a good equation with Israel. It's been a strategic partner, and it also has a good equation with the Palestinians, as we've seen in the recent Arab summit. So India probably doesn't want to deal itself out of the process if it is
Right.
moving forward. So we've chosen a kind of middle path. We haven't attended as a full-fledged member, but we've attended as an observer. So we'll keep a watch on what is happening and see how it progresses without having formally committed ourselves to it.
Right, but normally what happens? Because I remember, Ambassador, that on 12th of February, Randhir Jaiswal, who's the MAA spokesperson, said that we are considering the invite which has been extended for the Board of Peace. We're considering the proposal. That's what was said on 12th of February. And now on 20th February, we see that India has participated at the Board of Peace in the capacity of an observer. Do you think that these decisions should have been discussed or should have been disclosed with the House since the Parliament was in session? Or do you think that these things are not required when it comes to decisions like
No, it's
these?
always good to create a broad consensus and therefore to take these issues up and discuss them in Parliament, explaining the rationale for your decision. I think
Right,
that's always good because it helps to build a broader consensus on many of these decisions. There are actually in many situations no black and white decisions in
right.
international relations, and therefore actually consultations on a very broad basis is always something which is desirable.
Right. No, so which means that there was a window, India could have discussed it. And since the budget session was on at that time, then they could have discussed this in Parliament, but but the government didn't choose to inform the House or maybe discuss or have a broad consensus on it. But do you think that this decision would be good for India in the long run? Because obviously it's a decision which is against the rules based order. Because so far, India has been a founding member of the UN, and this is a body which is going to be seen parallelly running to the United Nations. Trump on many occasions has been saying that he's very dismissive about United Nations. So from that angle, if you see the things, do you think that this even if they are an observer, if India is just as an observer, but they do seem to be engaging with the Board of Peace in some way or the other. So will this move really be beneficial for India in the long run?
I think we haven't committed. When you're an observer, it means that you have not yet committed, your position with regard to the Board of Peace. And I think that will evolve depending on how the Board of Peace progresses. But yes, the concern that you have expressed is a very valid one, that you don't want to undermine the UN system by having parallel processes which start operating outside the ambit of the UN Security Council altogether.
Right. But I'm also a little apprehensive about what Donald Trump keeps saying. Now, I want to play out a bite of Donald Trump where he said that 11 jets are down. Now, let's hear what Donald Trump said, and then I'm going to come to the other aspects of what he said and what he shouldn't have. Abhiram, if you're there in the backstage, and if we can play out
That
that bite of Donald
Pakistan
Trump.
and India were
Yes.
really going at it. And then it got worse and worse, and many planes were shot down. It was all out. And I called them. I said, listen, I'm not doing trade deals with you two guys if you don't settle this up. They said, no, 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 that has both of them. They didn't want to do that. I said, no, it has to. If you don't do it, I'm not doing a trade deal. We're not doing a trade deal. And they do a lot of business with the United States, and they sort of softened up all of a sudden. And all of a sudden I read where there was a little bit of a pullback by one, then the other, and all of a sudden we worked out a deal, right? But I said, if you fight, I'm going to put 200% tariffs on each of your countries, which essentially makes you not allowed, you can't do any business. One of them, I won't say which one, said, no, can't do that. They both wanted to fight. But when it came to money, it's nothing like money. When it came to losing a lot of money, they said, I guess we don't want to fight. And we solved that deal in 2-3 days, right? And we did. We said, these are two very powerful nations. These are two nuclear nations. And I don't want to say what was going to happen, but, bad things happen.
Right. So Donald Trump has used this forum also again to talk about jets, about which India has been silent. Donald Trump again is talking about 200% tariffs. Of course, we do not have any clarity on what India's stand was since the time Operation Sindoor happened. My question to you, ma'am, is that will Donald Trump now leverage this forum for his own benefits to put more pressure on India? Will he use this board of peace as a pressurizing tactics also? And then that brings us to the most disturbing question, that can India be forced now to become a member of the board of peace, a full-time member of the board of peace?
I think we'll take our own decision based on how the Board of Peace evolves. I think Israel may also be keen that India be represented. And I suppose we will look at how it evolves. But as far as President Trump is concerned, he is really looking at getting Muslim nations to set up a stabilization force, and Indonesia has already committed some troops. I think he's putting pressure on Pakistan to send troops, and these are people who will try to stabilize the situation and, if necessary, uh, undertake the disarmament of Hamas. So again, we have to wait and see how the situation evolves. The second aspect, I think, which he's been focused on is the opportunities for business, development and infrastructure and rebuilding and so on. So I don't think that India will be a key focus, but yes, I think that his story about, or his narration of the U.S. role in bringing about peace in the wake of Operation Sindoor keeps getting more and more embellished each time that he refers to it. So, and we've seen, in a number of other cases where the claims that have been made have been more impressionistic than factual. So, whether these claims are actually true that he's threatened 200% tariffs and so on, because if you look at India's statements during that period, it was quite clear that we were not seeking a broad based military conflict. We were retaliating against terrorist camps and against those groups we believed had been involved in the terrorist incident in India. And after that, the statements made by our military spokesman indicated that as far as India was concerned, our mission had been completed. And now it would depend on Pakistan whether they wanted to let matters rest. But if they decided to take it forward militarily, then India would respond. So we were signaling actually quite clearly that we are not looking for a broad based conflict. So clearly, President Trump's understanding that both sides were wanting a broad based conflict and they were going at it. I don't know. I think there is, a difference in terms of how the Indian side was signaling during the conflict.
Right.
Uh, and therefore, as I said, there's a greater deal of embellishment in each retelling.
Right. But, ma'am, Trump has been saying that rebuilding Gaza is not the only motive of this board of peace. It will go and I mean it's looking at resolving other conflicts as well. So we do know that as far as the JNK issue is concerned, that is also a conflict between India and Pakistan. Now, what if India becomes a permanent member and then Donald Trump tries to rake up this issue? What happens then? I mean, does it not land India into a very sticky situation?
Theoretically, it could. And I'm sure that India will take
I'm
all
not
these
doing.
factors into account in taking its decision. But as far as India is concerned, we have made it clear that there's no question of third party mediation or any third party role.
All right. So again, then India is was present as the observer, and the opposition has been critical that why did India go as, in fact, why did it agree to be an observer? Now, can it be seen in that light that without informing the House, India was seen present as an observer at the Board of Peace? And the opposition raking up this issue. How do you really see that? Should India have refrained, or India did the right thing? There are questions on that.
Well, as I said, there are no black and white, decisions, what is right in a particular situation in international affairs. Quite often you're dealing with gray zones. I do feel, however, that even the decision to go as an observer would have been perhaps more well understood if there had been an effort to reach out across the aisle and explain the rationale for India's decision, why we were doing it, and what did we think was the best option for India in the circumstances.
Right. So you're saying that India could have done this, but should we say that India was wrong in not having a consensus and then participating as an observer on this?
Wrong, I don't know. This is also, it's an element of politics. But good politics always requires that you create a broad consensus
Right.
rather than let everything become a partisan issue.
Right. I also want to talk to you about this AI summit where India today has joined the Pact Silica. And this, of course, is the official joining of India as part of Pact Silica. Now, I'm seeing a lot of reactions on the social media that, it's almost like India has pledged away its data, its semiconductors, AI sovereignty, energy grids. Then they are also talking about geopolitics and strategic autonomy. Do you think that Pax Silica seems to be compromising all of this?
Uh, I, I think it's too early to say. Uh, India really has not developed a strong infrastructure for artificial intelligence as yet. Even our semiconductor mission is just in its infancy. It's incipient, I mean, it's just started. Factories
Yes.
are being established. So I think that at some level, there is this feeling that we need to collaborate with international partners. And if you remember, even with Biden, um, uh, we had looked at, emerging technologies and critical frontier technologies, critical minerals, in terms of setting up new areas of collaboration between India and the US. Given that artificial intelligence could disrupt the way Indian IT sector has been operating, because a lot of the low level jobs could get impacted, or could disappear with artificial intelligence. I think it's important for India to be part of a gathering like this, but also to preserve, our own negotiating space in the process.
But, ma'am, we do not know how much India has room for negotiations when it comes to its dealings with Donald Trump, because the general impression which everyone is getting is that apparently India is kowtowing to every bit of what Donald Trump is saying or what America is saying. And it seems that India is almost subservient to Donald Trump. That's what the impression goes. And especially after the trade deal which has been signed, it seems that India has given way too many concessions to America. So, how much room really will there be for India to negotiate? And of course, there are a lot of political reasons which are being talked about. Say, for example, there's Gautam Adani's case, then we have also Epstein files. People are questioning on all fronts. So, how much room does India really have for negotiation or for negotiating with Donald Trump?
Unfortunately, that's a reality of today's world. And other than China, I think all countries are dealing very gingerly with President Trump because of the huge asymmetry of economic power, military power, and the fact that most countries need the US market for exports. If you see Europe, if you see other areas, Vietnam, most countries have had what I would call somewhat one sided deals with the United States. And India held out for a considerable period of time, but now has decided to embrace pragmatism and do what is possible in the circumstances. It's not, a balanced or equal deal
Right.
because we are pledging to reduce duties substantially and to zero, if possible, on most industrial products. The US is increasing their duties from 3% to 18%. 3% was the average MFN duty before President Trump kicked in his reciprocal tariffs and punitive tariffs. But then, if you look at it from the other point of view, at one level there were 50% tariffs on India. Those now come down to 18%, which is somewhere in the middle of the tariffs that Trump has imposed. So Europe has got 15%, UK 10%, Australia 10%, Japan 15%, South Korea 15%. But most other developing countries in Asia have a tariff slightly higher than India. It's 19 or 20%. So we are somewhere in the middle, really. We haven't got a terrifically good bargain from the US. But relative to where we were, which was 50% tariff, which meant that many of our exports, especially labor-intensive exports, were hit. We are in a better place, but it also depends now on the fine print of the deal, because what we have right now is a framework
Yeah.
for an interim understanding. That interim understanding is likely to be finalized by middle or end of March. And then
Right.
the two sides are apparently continuing negotiations on a broader trade
Right.
agreement. So, right now, I think we have to wait and see the fine print of what emerges in terms of the actual interim trade deal. Because right now we have a framework,
Right.
and they've been toing and froing because the US removed the word commitment, from its
Right.
statement, because it had said that India is committed to buy $500 billion
Yes.
worth of US goods over 5 years. Now it is intends to, which means best endeavor.
Right.
Secondly, I think it has removed the statement that India will be opening up certain pulses. So that phrase has also been dropped. So, as I said, let's wait and see the details that emerge
Right.
uh, in terms of the actual interim trade deal.
Right.
We'll have a better idea.
But so far, whatever we are seeing, do you also, as a diplomat, feel that India is slowly and gradually losing its voice? When India was a poor nation, we had prime ministers who stuck out their neck and said what they felt, preserving the integrity and the sovereignty of the nation. But today, there are accusations on all fronts that India is actually giving away too many concessions, not raising its voice, almost prostrating before the American power. What is your feeling, ma'am?
Well, as I said, we don't have the details of the interim deal to actually make an informed judgment on
Right.
what has been given and what has been gained. What is the sum total of what has been given and what has been gained. But I would say that, you can look at the glass as half full and you
Hmm.
can look at it as half empty.
Right.
Certainly, it disrupts the global trading system. What Trump has done has virtually destroyed the WTO, because that was on the basis of multilateral negotiations and agreements which had been worked out over years between all countries who were signatories. And there was the principle of MFN, or most favored nation, which was at the basis of it, which means you can't have differential tariffs for different nations. There's one tariff which applies to all, unless you have a broad based free trade agreement with a country or a group of countries, in which case you can reduce. But this selective, negotiation of bilateral tariffs with countries in a situation of economic power asymmetry, it
Hmm.
puts other countries at a disadvantage vis-a-vis the
Right.
US. And yet, the reality is that the US market is so important to most countries that, other than China and Russia, which is facing sanctions, most countries have, accepted this disruption of the international trading system.
Right. Before I ask you the last question, I would just like to play out a little graphics of how many times Donald Trump has spoken on jets. Now, this is also a curious case of India Pakistan maths. And on that, I wanted you to comment a bit. But before that, I'll just give a slice to the viewers of how many times Donald Trump in the past almost 8, 9 months has spoken about the jets. Can we have that graphics on the screen? Yes. All right. Now look at this. Now these are Trump's claims on India-Pak hostilities. In July 2025, he said 5 jets shot down. Then in August 2025, he said jets shot down. November 2025, 7 jets down. November 2025 again, 8 planes shot down. Then Feb 11, 2026, 10 jets shot down. And yesterday he says 11 jets down. Now, how is Donald Trump, and this is my last question to you, ma'am, that how is Donald Trump playing India against Pakistan? I mean, he's wanting to placate Pakistan. He's also trying to put some kind of a pressure on India as well. So, how is Donald Trump seeing both India and Pakistan and knowing very well that they are like adversaries?
Well, he has, you know, been pandered to by Pakistan, if I may say that, because they have constantly praised his role in bringing about a ceasefire in the wake of Operation Sindoor. They praised him as a great peacemaker and nominated him for the Nobel Peace Prize. So that and the business deals that they have done with Trump's family have ingratiated Pakistan with President Trump. But at the same time, I think there is a record, and of course, the need for Pakistani troops in Gaza, because they are perhaps the most professional army in amongst the other countries, Muslim countries, who could possibly play a role. And you remember the Black September massacre in Jordan, where the PLO camps and they were attacked and the Palestinians were killed. And it was Ziaul Haq, who was then a brigadier, who had played the key role on behalf of Jordan. So there's a history for Pakistan, but it also puts them on the horns of a dilemma, because many Muslim troops may not be very comfortable in this day. Those were different times. Today, given what has happened in Gaza, It's going to put them on the horns of a dilemma if they actually have to engage in disarming Hamas or firing on Palestinians. So it's not that Pakistan is in an easy situation
Right.
right now.
Okay, so we'll have to wait and watch how things unfold. And yes, on the board of peace fronts, again, we'll have to see what happens, and India is going to gauge the situation and then probably take a call. Thank you so much, Ambassador Meera Shankar, for joining on the Federal. Thank you. Thank you very much.